racial divide here.
Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think?
All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN.
I'm Paula Hancock in Seoul. This is CNN.
Hello everyone, I'm Zain Asher in New York and this is One World. Ukraine's president says the battle for Severodonetsk in the country's east could determine the fate of the entire Donbas region. And that battle is not looking good right now for Ukrainian troops. Local officials say that Russia now controls most of the city and that Ukrainian forces faced heavy shelling overnight in the city's industrial zone and in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, controlled by separatists. A pro-Russian court has sentenced 3 men to death. The Russian state media reports that 2 British citizens and a Moroccan national are accused of being mercenaries for Ukraine. Salma Dalaziz joins us live now. She's following this story from Kyiv. Salma, what more do we know about these 3 men?
So the story of these 3 men, particularly the 2 Britons that we're speaking of here, British citizen Aidan Aslan and Sean Pinner, they've been splashed all over the UK media for months now. Now, all 3 men were members of the Ukrainian military. They were fighting in Mariupol when they were captured in April. Now, of course, under the Geneva Conventions, they should be treated as prisoners of war. Now, the accusation here is, of course, that they are not being treated as such. The Donetsk People's Republic, this is a separatist-backed region, only recognized by Russia. That means that this verdict is not recognized by the international community as legitimate. Furthermore, human rights groups, watch organizations say that the Donetsk People's Republic's courts have an appalling record when it comes to human rights. These 3 men showed up in a court, again, in this separatist region. There was images of that, and they were accused of being mercenaries, of plotting terrorism, and sentenced to death. Now, the family in particular of Aidan Aslan has made accusations that he's been tortured in detention by Russian-backed separatists. There are concerns, obviously, for their fate. They have the right to appeal, according to this court, according to this Russian-backed court. They have 1 month to appeal this verdict. British officials are, of course, scrambling to try to extract these men from this crisis, from this situation. But at the same time, there are fears and concerns among their campaigners that these men are being used essentially as a bargaining chip, as a tool by Russia to try and extract whatever they may want from British authorities. So this now is, of course, highly concerning. These 3 men, again, legitimate members of the Ukrainian armed forces, being treated in a way that the British officials, that their own family says, in violation of the Geneva Conventions, concerns about their health and safety. An appeal here you're sure to see with these 3 men. We'll wait to find out more on their fate, Zain.
All right, Salma Dalaziz live for us there. Thank you so much. Russia took control of Kherson in southern Ukraine in the early days of the war, and now the Russian-appointed leader there says its integration into Russia has already begun. But Ukraine is fighting back. It has stepped up counterattacks there in recent weeks, possibly using some of the new advanced weaponry sent by the US. Our Matthew Chance got a rare look at one of these new weapons.
These are just some of the powerful American guns now on the Ukrainian front lines, meant to make a critical difference in the war with Russia. Of course, they might be targeted at any moment. Media access to them is highly sensitive and rare.
All right, well, we've been taken here very close to the front lines in southern Ukraine, where we're being shown these US-provided long-range artillery systems. It's an M777. According to Ukrainian military officials that we've spoken to, the US has so far supplied approximately 90 of these weapons, and many of them are already being used on the front line, including in this area here in the south of Ukraine, pounding Russian positions.
We were only shown a training exercise, but Ukrainian military officials say these are exclusive images of the same weapons in action just this week, firing on Russian forces more than 20 miles away. including on this Grad multiple rocket launcher they say had been targeting civilian areas. Ukrainian aerial footage shows the Grad being destroyed, its ammunition exploding after a direct hit. Ukrainian artillery troops say their guns are now giving them an edge, and their Russian counterparts are feeling the pain.
Yes, they definitely notice as we became faster and more precise. They are not able to keep up with us as they are operating old Soviet guns, which are heavier, less precise, slower, and difficult to use. These guns are objectively the best in the world, and when we started using them, our efficiency rose tremendously.
It's giving the Ukrainian military an advantage, they say, on the battlefield, because these weapons are much lighter, much more accurate than they've used before, much more mobile as well. And it's giving them the edge, they say, to try and help them push back Russian forces all along this region. But of course, the complaint, if you can call it a complaint, is that they want more of this. They want more weapons like this, and they want even longer range rocket systems, which have already been promised, of course, by the United States, to push back the Russians even further.
And Ukrainian authorities are likely to need more guns still to hold them back. With no end to this conflict, the demand for US weapons may be endless too. Matthew Chance, CNN, in southern Ukraine.
The special U.S. House committee investigating the storming of the Capitol on January 6 last year will begin to lay out its case on primetime television later on tonight. The panel will try to make the connection between former U.S. President Donald Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election and the shocking violence at the Capitol building on that infamous day. Here's our Pamela Brown with more.
After a nearly year-long investigation, the January 6th committee will share its findings with the American people tonight. In a preview, aides said they plan to zero in on President Trump.
I think that Donald Trump and the White House were at the center of these events. That's the only way, really, of making sense of them all.
Aides said the committee will connect the dots between Trump's election lies, his attempts to stop the transfer of power to President Joe Biden, and the violence at the Capitol. While Trump was impeached by the House just days after the riot for inciting the pro-Trump insurrectionists, the committee says it's uncovered more since then.
The Select Committee has found evidence about a lot more than incitement here.
The committee has interviewed more than 1,000 witnesses behind closed doors, including Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Rudy Giuliani, former Attorney General Bill Barr, and obtained more than 135,000 documents.
We must also know what happened every minute of that day in the White House. Every phone call, every conversation, every meeting leading up to, during, and after the attack.
The committee is clearly signaling to the Justice Department, which holds the power to charge Trump with a crime related to January 6.
Do you believe it was a conspiracy?
I do. It is extremely broad. It's extremely well organized. It's really chilling.
Just this week, a federal judge again flagged possible evidence of a crime. That same judge issued a landmark ruling earlier this year, finding it was more likely than not that Trump and a conservative lawyer committed a crime and strategizing to overturn the election. Trump has not been charged with the crime and has denied any wrongdoing. He continues to downplay his involvement in the deadly insurrection while bashing the committee's work as another, quote, witch hunt.
January 6th, what a lot of crap. It's another con job, just like Russia.
But for 187 minutes, committee members say Trump was derelict in his duty, watching TV, and seemingly pleased supporters were fighting for him, even as Republicans pleaded for Trump to intervene in text messages to his White House chief of staff.
It is a roadmap, and I would have to say at this point, I think Mark Meadows is the MVP for the committee.
Denver Riggleman advised the committee, helping to decode Meadows' texts among the more than 2,300 messages obtained by CNN. Donald Trump Jr. texting, he's got to condemn this shit ASAP. Meadows responding, I am pushing it hard, I agree. But it took Trump over 3 hours to release this recorded video.
So go home. We love you. You're very special.
When you look at the totality of the evidence, it's pretty apparent that at some points President Trump knew what was going on.
Well, the hearings are not only expected to explore efforts to overturn the election results, but also the role of far-right extremist groups. 1 month after the election, Trump tweeted about the protests in D.C. on January 6th, and then the following day, the Proud Boys began to plan for the rally, knowing they might have to break the law to stop the certification of votes. That's according to a plea agreement from one member of the Proud Boys who is now cooperating with the federal investigation. The DOJ escalating that criminal case this week, charging several leaders with seditious conspiracy.
It's Pamela Brown reporting there. CNN's politics senior reporter Stephen Collison joins us live now from Washington, D.C. Stephen, it's been a while. Good to see you. So lawmakers can't indict Trump in all of this. I think it's important to note. But the goal is to make sure that he does not get away with what happened on January 6th in the court of public opinion. Walk us through that, Stephen.
Right, and that has really been the question that has shadowed Trump, not just through his political career, but through his business and personal life. Will he get away with it again? What the committee is trying to do is two things. First, to build a picture of a broad conspiracy with Trump at the middle of it, people all around him pulling strings, not just to incite this riot at the Capitol, but to overthrow the peaceful transfer of power, something that never happened before in the history of the United States. The other point is, and I think that we'll see this tonight with new footage of the riot, is to remind the American people of just how serious this was, how unprecedented, and how dangerous it is to the future of democracy in the United States. I think the question is, will it have a big impact 17 months on? Many Americans are much more concerned about record gasoline prices, high inflation, a pandemic that never seems to end. So they have a big task, I think, in casting back the clock to those horrible days back in the beginning of January 2021. And of course, looks like Trump is actually running for president again in 2024. So this all has massive current political implications.
And when you think about the fact that, as you point out, we have an election coming up in this country, in the US, in 2 years, Trump is obviously, well, likely going to run. They're playing this on primetime television just to sort of maximize the number of eyeballs on this. However, Fox News is not going to be airing this. So what kind of impact will it really have on the next presidential elections, do you think, Stephen?
I think it's very difficult to think that there is anyone in the United States that hasn't made their mind up about what they think about Donald Trump. Clearly, there are some voters in suburban districts who voted for Joe Biden because they wanted to get rid of Trump in 2020, who've left the president. Now, building a picture of basically a potential president who is, to all intents and purposes, an autocrat, that could again scare some of those voters off. So I don't think we can really tell right now what the political impact will be. But clearly, people like the Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who has basically sacrificed her career to turn against her party and take on Donald Trump and tell the truth about what happened on January 6th, they want to end Trump's possibility of running again for president and getting back inside the Oval Office. That was one of the goals of impeaching him for the second time over January the 6th, but Republicans in the Senate didn't convict him. This is another chance at that, but you know, so many of Trump's supporters believe his version of January the 6th over what really happened, and the fact that conservative media is not going to cover this or will distort it, I think it's very unlikely to loosen at least the former president's control over his own party.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, everyone's pretty much made up their mind about what they think about Donald Trump and, for the most part, what happened on January 6th. Do you think that the Justice Department here in the US will likely go after Trump?
It's a good question. I think it's a very difficult and highly charged political question. The committee could refer Trump or people around him to the Justice Department for potential prosecution. That has happened with some senior Trump aides like Steve Bannon, who refused to testify to the committee. I feel like the chances of the Justice Department in the middle of a midterm election campaign season, heading into a 24 presidential election in which Trump could be a competitor, the chance of them indicting him and the chance of them believing they can actually get a conviction on what could be quite a difficult set of charges, I think is unlikely. It's more likely perhaps that they would refer people around Trump to the Justice Department. And then there could be some action taken against them, particularly, for example, in the case of some of the shenanigans that were happening down in Georgia in the attempt to steal the election in that critical state. But the chances that former President Trump will go on trial for what happened on January the 6th, I think are pretty slim.
Yeah, you point out that sort of infamous discussion that Donald Trump had with Georgia's top election official saying, hey, listen, I need you to find me more votes. Where are my votes? Find me more votes. Yeah, a lot of people cried foul with all of that. Stephen Collinson live for us there. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, be sure to tune in to CNN for live coverage of the January 6th committee hearings. That starts at 7 p.m. Thursday, Washington. And if you are watching from Hong Kong, that will be 7 a.m. Friday morning, your time. Of course, only here on CNN. Also on Capitol Hill, the U.S. House of Representatives approved a sweeping gun control package Wednesday. 218 Democrats voted for it, along with a handful of Republicans, but it's not expected to pass the Senate because there is strong opposition by Republicans there. Meantime, on a late-night TV show, President Joe Biden answered questions about what he alone can do on gun reform.
Can't you issue an executive order? Trump passed those out like Halloween candy.
Yes, sir.
I think. Isn't that something that could happen?
Well, I have issued executive orders within the power of the presidency to be able to deal with these, everything having to do with guns, gun ownership, whether or not you have to have a waiting, all the things that are within my power. But what I don't want to do, and I'm not being facetious, I don't want to emulate Trump's abuse of the Constitution and constitutional authority.
Mr. Biden also encouraged voters to make their feelings known at the ballot box. Police in California searched the last known residence of a man arrested near the home of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The FBI says the suspect had a knife, a pistol, ammunition, pepper spray, and other items when he was arrested on Wednesday. According to an FBI affidavit, the suspect told law enforcement officers he wanted to kill a specific Supreme Court judge. Court documents say that he was upset about the leaked Supreme Court draft opinion on abortion and the recent school shooting in Texas. Conservative Justice Kavanaugh sided with the majority in the leaked Supreme Court opinion that would overturn Roe versus Wade. All right, coming up, the UK is set to start deporting asylum seekers to Rwanda, but not if some human rights groups can help it. We'll have a live report for you from Kigali ahead.
Culinary Journeys in association with Ajinomoto.
March 29th, 2022, Turkey. This is the annual gathering of the best 50 restaurants in Asia. On this night, Natsuko Shoji is taking home the title of Asia's best female chef. Ete was also chosen as one of Asia's top 50 restaurants.
People often say to me, why do you want awards? Or isn't it enough if your customers are satisfied? Of course, that is important, but I believe that an award is a passport to the world, something that will allow me to create change in the future. My goal is to win the world's best female chef award one day.
The pandemic reminded us of how important diet is to health. That's why the Ajinomoto Group is committed to solving health issues around the world at the dinner table. A real solution means never settling for less.
ถึงแม้ว่าจะต้องลดความเค็มในอาหารลงแต่เราก็ต้องไม่ละทิ้งความอร่อยเราต้องการให้ทุกท่านได้เพลิดเพลินกับรสชาติความอร่อยของอาหารไปพร้อมกับสุขภาพที่ดี
A saúde é importante, mas queremos considerar também o legado do sabor regional. Como podemos melhorar o balanço nutricional, mantendo o respeito à cultura gastronômica? Esse é o nosso desafio.
Tempat yang jauh pun bukan masalah. Kami selalu bisa menyediakannya. Kami terus mengupayakan dunia di mana siapapun bisa mengakses makanan bergizi dimanapun mereka berada.
We're here to provide nutritious meals to the entire world without compromising on taste, local ways of life, or accessibility, because that is nutrition without compromise.
Eat well, live well.
June 20th, a CNN concert event. Let's celebrate, educate, and lift every voice. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
All right, you guys ready?
Alex Jones. How much damage can one man do to school shooting victims and the country? CNN asks those who know him.
Truth doesn't really matter at all.
Megaphone for Conspiracy. Alex Jones. Monday on CNN.
In exactly 5 days from now, the UK will start deporting asylum seekers it deems to have arrived in the country illegally. But these asylum seekers will not be deported to their home countries. Instead, they'll be deported to Rwanda. Let me repeat that for you. Anyone who arrives in the UK illegally this year, no matter where they're from, could be flown to Rwanda. The first flight takes off on Tuesday. As part of the deal, the UK will pay Rwanda more than $150 million. The move is intended to deter people from illegally entering Britain, especially by crossing the English Channel. Human rights groups are seeking to block the deportations, calling the scheme unlawful, dangerous, and very, very cruel. CNN's Larry Madowo joins us live now in Kigali. So, Larry, when these asylum seekers arrive in Rwanda, what exactly awaits them? What can they expect?
The first asylum seekers from the UK who are expected here Wednesday next week will be staying at this small hostel here in Kigali, sharing a room, and they will have full board accommodation, they will have cleaning, they will have some entertainment. And the Rwandan government says, most importantly, they will be free to move around, which they don't have in detention in the UK, even though there's some significant opposition even here in Rwanda, which is Africa's most densely populated nation. There are murmurs, people saying, we don't want more people to come in here. We're already resource stretched and we can't just take in this many more people. However, the people who will be welcoming the migrants say, we're ready. These are the final touches at Hope Hostel in Kigali before the first migrants deported from the UK arrive. And so this is the new place waiting for the migrants.
Yep.
This building that until recently housed the young survivors of the Rwandan genocide has a new purpose. This newly renovated hostel can host up to 100 people, 2 to a room, and sharing communal bathrooms. So this is one sample room.
Yes, this is the one sample room for the first floor. Different amenities.
It's got towels, it's got an iron box, it's got a change of sheets.
Yes.
This is where the migrants will live under the watchful eye of Rwandan authorities. The hostel is functional, not luxurious, but the Rwandan government says the migrants will be free here, not in detention like in the UK. View Kigali. Officials are also promising healthcare and support for at least 5 years or until they're self-sufficient. But the plan has been widely criticized by many refugee rights groups in the UK, internationally, and here in Rwanda. The main opposition party here says Rwanda shouldn't have to bear the UK's burden.
It is their responsibility.
So you think the UK is violating its international obligations by passing that off to Rwanda?
Yes. And we don't see why. We are still struggling of having enough infrastructure. Electricity, water, roads, schools, hospitals. We are not the same like UK. We have to think twice.
Rwanda and the UK expect this migrant scheme to disrupt the business of people smugglers. But many international bodies, even the UK, rank Rwanda poorly on some human rights indicators. Critics also say accepting migrants rich countries don't want is cruel and inhumane.
It's cruel and it's inhumane that people are dying in the desert, trying to cross the desert, making these dangerous journeys, drowning in the Mediterranean. We're interested in protecting vulnerable people, and this has been our philosophy for the last 30 years.
We have fast processing.
Rwanda has also welcomed refugees and asylum seekers evacuated from Libya after unsuccessfully trying to cross to Europe. Orientation has started for the latest arrivals at the Gashora Emergency Transit Center. They're mostly from the Horn of Africa. How do you compare the conditions in the 4 years you spent in Libya and here in Rwanda?
Actually, it is so difficult to compare it because we can't say from hell to heaven.
Being in Libya to Rwanda is like coming from hell to heaven.
Yeah.
Zemen is grateful for the peace and freedom in Rwanda, but it's still not his destination of choice. None of the people we spoke to here wanted to stay, even though it's one of the options. Your final goal is still to go to Europe?
Yeah.
Rwanda has become the global market leader in migrant offshoring. After the UK scheme, a deal with Denmark is in the works. It helps clean up Rwanda's image internationally, but some accuse it of trying to paint over a dark reputation. The first flights out of the UK here to Rwanda might not take off next week because the advocates for these migrants who've been told they will be removed are actively trying to stop it. Part of it is because they're not keen to come here to Rwanda because they've never been here. And it's a complex issue. You hear some Africans who say this is Afrophobia and Rwanda is actually a stable country that they should be happy to come to instead of detention. But the others, they made these perilous journeys, some of them crossing the Mediterranean into Calais, across the Channel into Dover, because they wanted to live in the UK, not in an African nation 6,000 kilometers away, Zain.
Yeah, it's hugely controversial. As you mentioned, human rights groups are really upset about them. I've had a few of those voices on this program. Larry Madoa live for us there. Thank you so much. All right, still to come here on One World, Belgium's king expresses regret for his country's brutal actions in the Congo during colonial times. Why critics say those words are not enough and what some are demanding instead.
Inside Africa, in association with Zenith Bank.
See the situation of the country and people complaining about unemployment, I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Bright Jaja is on a mission to change that by first working to change the public's perception of trade work in Nigeria.
We just create a system that supports training. We identify experts, match them with people who want to train, and then they run an apprenticeship program for about 3 months to a year. Some of the trade that we focused on are carpentry, tiling, graphic design, web design, makeup, basically everything technical and vocational.
Bright says I Create Africa has had a big impact and has even bigger goals.
It's changing things. When it comes to the people that we've trained directly and connected to jobs directly, they're over 20,000. Our goal is to hit 5 million in the next 5 years.
My name is Stephen Jameson, Global Head of Circular Economy Solutions at SAP. The aim of a circular economy is to eliminate waste, circulate materials, keep products in use as long as possible, and regenerate natural systems. We're talking about a fundamental reworking of how we deliver the economy. At the moment, we're based upon an extractive system which depends upon nature, but is ultimately extractive. That will only go one way in the long term. A regenerative economy ultimately creates abundance of opportunity, abundance of materials, abundance of resources that enable us to thrive as a species and thrive as a piece of nature and as a part of nature.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Hello and welcome back to One World. Let's catch up on the headlines quickly. A reminder of our top story. 3 men have been sentenced to death in Russian-controlled Donetsk for, quote, seizing power by force. 2 are British men and 1 is a Moroccan national fighting for Ukraine. The men can appeal the conviction. The British Foreign Secretary has called the trial a sham and says the men are actually prisoners of war. The International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran is removing more than 24 cameras used to monitor their nuclear plants. Iranian state media says this video you see on your screen shows some of those cameras being turned off. Experts fear the move could defeat efforts to revive a 2015 nuclear agreement aimed at preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. In Berlin, prosecutors say that a German-Armenian national will be taken into psychiatric care after he plowed his car into a crowd in a busy shopping district on Wednesday. His motive remains unclear. One teacher was killed and another is fighting for his life. Students with the teacher were injured, but not critically. Roughly 60 years after colonialism largely ended in Africa, the pain inflicted on the continent is still very much palpable. It was a brutal and racist system, but perhaps no reign was more vicious than that of Belgium's in the Congo. During the regime of King Leopold II, the Congolese suffered mass atrocities, from killings to beatings and forced labor. Under threat of violence, colonizers forced locals to collect natural resources like rubber, for example. And if they couldn't meet quotas, they were often mutilated by those who took their limbs after taking their land. All told, roughly 10 million people died in the darkest moments of Leopold's rule. But now, decades after the DRC became independent, the current Belgian king is taking steps to make amends. While visiting the country this week, King Philippe expressed regret for colonialism, decorated a Congolese war veteran, and returned a traditional mask of the Suku people that was looted by colonizers.
The colonial regime was based on exploitation and domination. It was a regime of unequal and unjustifiable relationships, marked by paternalism, discrimination, and racism. It led to violent acts and humiliations. On my first trip to the Congo, here in front of the Congolese people and those who are still suffering from it, I wish to reaffirm my deepest regrets for these past wounds.
One thing you didn't hear in King Philippe's speech was a direct apology. Critics say that acknowledgement is overdue and some want financial reparations.
I came because I wanted to look the Belgian king in the eye, to know what he looks like, but also to understand how he could abandon us for so long. We hope that the king's presence here will solve many problems. In other countries, we see how they're supported by their colonizers in many areas, like unemployment and stabilization of social life. But us, we don't even know the language of the Belgians.
Time now for the exchange with a deeper look at the impact of colonialism in Africa. My next guest wrote a book that reframes the continent's place in world history. It's called Born in Blackness, Africa, Africans, and the Making of the Modern World. Howard French joins us live now. So Howard, thank you so much for being with us. When you think about King Philippe's remarks there in the DRC, he talked about discrimination, he talked about racism, he talked about violence and brutality. He said that he deeply regrets what happened under King Leopold's rule in the DRC. He didn't apologize. What do you make of his remarks overall?
Thank you for having me. The first thing I would say is that we should be graceful enough to say that this is a nice first step, but that it is only a first step. And that just as the Chinese, for example, in another part of the world, and the Koreans are still demanding that the Japanese apologize for atrocities in a more recent war, World War II. It is normal that the Congolese and other peoples of Central Africa should expect the Belgians to address their history with detail and with specifics, and not simply to issue a general statement of regret, but actually to apologize for the specific actions that caused harm and death to many millions of people.
What does the king sort of open himself and his country up to by actually issuing a direct apology? Of course, you've heard a lot of Congolese people talking about wanting reparations, wanting financial compensation for what happened. What does he open himself up to?
Well, I think there are two reasons why the Belgians and the king specifically have avoided direct apology up until this point. And the first of them is specifically this issue of avoiding reparations. Belgium, it must be said, is not unique among European imperial powers to avoid apologizing for the colonial past in Africa. The British have not apologized, the French have not apologized, The Portuguese have not apologized, and those other colonizers are able to hide behind the famous atrocities of the Belgians with the pretense that they weren't so bad after all. In fact, all of these colonial records were awful, and all of these countries, all of these powers have an overdue obligation to apologize directly and to recognize in specific the details of their misdeeds in the past. The other reason the Belgian king has been reticent about apology is, I think, that the Belgian public has not really been educated. There's no real school curriculum that addresses the record of colonial rule in the past, and this has allowed the public to maintain a rather rosy view of colonial rule, where it's commonplace for even people of goodwill to assume that the Belgians did good things for the Africans in the Congo and that they have nothing to be ashamed of.
I mean, it's interesting because Germany just last year gave about just over $1 billion to Namibia, admitting their role in genocide in that country. So, you know, yes, of course, many other colonizing nations in Europe have not issued direct apologies, but Germany did go one step further in not necessarily giving reparations, but they did give a large lump sum. Why can't Belgium do the same?
Well, the Dutch, it should be said, have also recently recognized and apologized formally for atrocities committed in Indonesia in their colonial history in the same period in that part of the world. And so if you take the examples of the Dutch and the Germans, there is no absolute reason to justify the failure of the British and of the French and of the Portuguese and the people who are our topic today, the Belgians, for doing this. Apology is overdue, and an apology should come with a recognition that there were human costs involved in the atrocities of colonial rule in this part of the world, but that there are also financial costs imposed on the development of these peoples, and that there's a legacy of these financial costs that live with us down to today in the misery and poverty of the Congo. The Congo's misery and poverty are directly related to the affluence of Belgium. Belgium was extracting wealth from the Congolese, even as they were persecuting people. And so reparations has to take that all into account. You can't really put a price on human life, but we must begin the conversation by recognizing that in these acts of atrocities, there was also an economic dimension, and that to make this right, the repair must also involve an economic dimension. And that's what we mean by reparations.
I mean, it's interesting because King Philippe visited Congo just about 2 years ago, visited the same place 2 years ago, in sort of celebration, if you will, of in their independence from Belgium. And again, he stopped short of an apology. And again, there was a similar reaction. So by coming back this time and offering regrets, talking about racism, talking about brutality and violence, but again, not issuing a direct apology, he must have known there would be this reaction.
I think he did. I think the king, the present-day king, has still somewhat ill-formed and fond memories of his great uncle, who was the famous author of the most atrocious acts, King Leopold II, in the late 19th century. But also, the Belgian king is at the head of a large delegation, which involves the prime minister and other members of government and presumably many business people. And Belgium keeps returning to the Congo for the same reasons that attracted Leopold in the late 19th century. The Congo is an economic prize for tiny Belgium. It was once called a geological scandal because of the immense array of strategic minerals that this country has a near monopoly of. And so the Belgians are coming back and making these incremental steps toward amends and toward recognition, I think, at least in part, in hopes of improving their business prospects and getting more of the economic pie, if you will, out of the Congolese economy.
Howard French, live for us, thank you so much for stopping in the middle of your trip, I hear, as you're traveling to join us on the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much.
Of course. All right, players in today's inaugural Live Golf tournament got some concerning news. Their services on the PGA Tour are no longer required. Some of the world's top golfers teed off earlier near London in the Saudi-backed tournament. The PGA Tour officials said the players did not get the proper release to play in a conflicting tournament, so they are suspended. Several of the 17 golfers already gave up their membership to play on the controversial tour. Alex Thomas joins us live now from St. Albans with a look at what all of this means for the future of golf. So give us more color, Alex, on the suspensions. How long might they be suspended for?
Zain, at some stage we'll be talking about the golf action at this new Live Golf Series, but that day is not today, after men's professional golf broke out into virtual civil war, certainly a war of words at the very least, because the PGA Tour had several options about how it could react to this rival golf series, and it took the nuclear option, frankly, the most brutal response it could come up with, which was to ban all the players who had been PGA Tour members or are still PGA Tour members from any of its competitions, whether that's President's Cup team events, the PGA Tour, the feeder tours, the Champions Tour for over 50s. So it was absolutely a kind of "you are dead to me" response. The memo from PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan was actually addressed to the current PGA Tour members, the players that didn't jump ship. And I'll give you a flavour of what was a 2-page, 9-paragraph long letter. I'm certain our fans and partners, who are surely tired of all this talk of money, money and more money, will continue to be entertained and compelled by the world-class competition you display each and every week. That doesn't do justice to the simmering fury that boiled out from every line of that letter, Zain. And I'll tell you that the Live Golf response was much more succinct and just as brutal, and it was this: today's announcement by the PGA Tour is vindictive and it deepens the divide between the Tour and its members. This certainly is not the last word on this topic. The era of free agency is beginning. That is code for this is heading for the courts. And you can get the reason why if you remember that Phil Mickelson 2 days ago talked about what the PGA Tour might do. He was a bit reticent, and now we know why. Take a listen to what he did say.
I've gained a lot. I've received a lot from the PGA Tour. I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful for everything the PGA Tour and the game of golf has provided for me and my family. I've also worked really hard to contribute and try to build and add value to the tour during my time there. And I worked really hard to earn a lifetime exemption. And I don't want to give that up. I don't believe I should have to.
Mickelson said he didn't quit the PGA Tour because he's earned that lifetime membership, Zain. The ones that did quit the PGA Tour can't go back even as sponsors' invites. Live Golf has said they will fund any legal challenges from these players, and that's where I think this is headed, Zain.
All right, we'll see what happens. Alex Thomas live for us there. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching One World. I'm Zain Asher. Inside Africa is up next. You're watching CNN.
On culinary journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. My name is Raza Jaffer, and I'm the founder of Global Sustainability Network and currently based in Dubai. GSN was founded in 2015 with myself, Bishop Sanchez from the Vatican, and Lord Bishop Alistair Redfern from Church of England. GSN was founded to help support heroes who are working around the world to fight modern-day slavery. And we've got a huge task ahead of us as a commitment signed by 193 countries to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So our purpose is actually to support organizations who are our heroes in ending modern-day slavery.
released last year the very first motorcycle with radar. And what that's allowed us to do is to be able to put some technology in the motorcycle that gives features of safety for the rider, including blind spot indicators that's been used on cars for years. So we're not only dedicated to that performance, but also to try and improve our environmental impact and also the safety for the riders themselves.
Friday, new details on what happened inside the White House during the Capitol attack. The January 6 hearings. Live coverage starts Friday on CNN.
Next, go inside the inventive minds, the evolving places, and the creative trends of the Africa you need to know now. Inside Africa, next, in association with Zenith Bank.
Inside Africa, in association with Zenith Bank.
Educators are redefining teaching approaches and spaces
This mobile school is big enough to contain a tent.
to better equip the youth for the increasingly technology-driven world.
We need more skills that are critical thinking and design and systems thinking.
From establishing coding courses in South Africa
It seemed to me that if I could teach someone how to code, this would be like giving them a superpower.
to raising the profile of skilled work in Nigeria.
The goal is to get more young people to have the courage to do what they want to do without being told or without being ashamed or afraid of the stereotypes.
The educational landscape is evolving across the continent. This is Inside Africa.
So they have everything that they need, machines.
Now, yes, the machines, everything they need.
Across Nigeria, as of 2020, 35% of young people are unemployed, and a lack of technical training courses further limits job opportunities. Bright Jaja is on a mission to change that by first working to change the public's perception of trade work in Nigeria, a seed planted many years ago.
I think it just started from when I was a child. My mom is a trader, and she used to drag me with her whenever she's going to the market. And so I literally grew up mostly around tradespeople, saw how they were not appreciated.
Through his organization, I Create Africa, the Abuja-based entrepreneur says he's tackling issues that affect young Nigerians and putting respect where it's due.
To now see the situation of the country and people complaining about unemployment, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Why is it that people are not doing these jobs that I grew up around? And then I discovered that, oh, it's because of that negative perception. And I think I took that responsibility to find a way to fix that. I Create Africa started in 2017. Basically, our focus is to highlight the importance of technical and vocational skill trades as a key component for youth development and employment. We just create a system that supports training. We identify experts, match them with people who want to train, and then they run an apprenticeship program for about 3 months to a year. Just seeing them learn from professionals and from experts, it's just amazing. Some of the trade that we focused on are carpentry, tiling, graphic design, web design, makeup, basically everything technical and vocational.
Bright says I Create Africa has had a big impact and has even bigger goals.
It's changing things. When it comes to the people that we've trained directly and contested jobs directly, they're over 20,000. Our goal is to hit 5 million in the next 5 years.
One way he's doing this is through an annual competition he started 5 years ago.
This is hands-on. This is how they should be trained. This is exactly how they should be trained. The I Create Skills Fest is a platform that we created as a tool to change the negative societal perception of technical skills. It's bring all the partners into one space to discuss on how we can change the structures and the policies that affect training and vocational skills. There's a skills competition, bringing technicians and craftsmen together to compete and showcase their skills excellence. We have an award night where we recognize all the amazing talents. It's called the Olympics of Skills. We give them medals, we give them cash prizes, tools worth millions, and they are onboarded on our platform, which is skillers.ng, so that they can get access to jobs.
Bright says, despite the challenges of putting on an event like Skills Fest, the lives changed make it more than worth it.
It's hard for us to get the funding that we need. We struggle to get partners to understand the value because we live in a country where people are focused on profit making. We've had a lot of winners and their success stories have been amazing. Winifred is an electrician. She was the only female in the entire competition when it comes to construction.
I had the passion, but then as a female, there was a lot of challenges in the field. A lot of discouragement keeps coming, but after the competition, the passion grew even more stronger, and I had that zeal to continue, and that's what has been paying my bills till now as I speak to you.
I'm at El Amin International School, Abuja, and this is where I come for inspiration. Hi, how are you? I found out about El Amin in 2016. I met the owner of the school, the director, Mrs. Jumai Sambo. She just, brought me to the school to talk to the kids, and there was just a connection. What did you see yourself in 3 years? I like that. I like that. He doesn't know, and it's okay not to know, right? It's okay. So whenever I'm here and I'm working, I'm just getting tired, I just stop everything. Once I walk into the school, the way they run and just come and hug me, it just reminds me that this is the reason why I'm doing this. It's for the next generation.
From inspiration to execution, Bright says there's a lot more up his sleeve.
One of the most important things for us is to create an end-to-end system. Started by creating a project, which is the Skills Fest, right? What happens next? What do you do with all those people? And so we designed the Skillers platform, which is a digital hiring platform for artisans. And what Skillers.ng does is to formalize the informal process of acquiring and hiring technicians. What's next for us is to build a skills park made up of different structures that promotes technical and vocational skills from start to finish. We want young people to walk into that space without a skill and walk out with a product. And we want to do that across Nigeria.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. In today's fast-moving, fast-changing world, you need a financial partner that understands your unique expectations. A bank with presence in major financial centers across the world, with the enabling platform to facilitate seamlessly, whenever, wherever, however. A bank with best-in-class financial solutions from a superb combination of technology and human touch for easy, fast, and secure banking that creates real value. Turning dreams into reality is now in your hands. People, technology, service. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
Tomorrow, more of the Africa you need to know now. Go inside the inventive minds, the evolving places, and the creative trends. Inside Africa, tomorrow, in association with Zenith Bank.
A new school day dawns on the outskirts of Morocco's capital, Rabat. And this unconventional classroom setup is in keeping with the teaching approaches within it.
We use technology and non-technology methods to teach the students. And this mobile school is big enough to contain a tent in case there isn't a space where we can bring in all these students together. Sabahul khair. Good morning.
Good morning.
Buenos dias.
Sharif Hamidi launched Ed 4.0 Mobile to take numeracy learning to remote areas in Morocco.
We targeted Morocco for our numeracy educational program because my home country, Morocco, ranked 73rd out of 76 countries in PISA tests, which are standardized tests that gauge students' abilities on numeracy and sciences. We felt that we had to do something about this. Having a good foundational skills on numeracy and sciences is a must to excel in the future, in the labor markets of the future. And that's why we're here. كيف غنحسبها؟ عندكم 10 ثواني.
When Sharif and his team visited